Hello and welcome back to Paul's SAT Reading Comprehension course. In this shorter video, we're going to talk about vocabulary and context questions. This is its own video because they're their own special kind of question and that are particularly difficult for some students. So we're going to focus on this one out of connection with everything else because they have their own specific kind of strategy. So in this video, we're going to talk about what strategy you should use for vocabulary and context questions and how many kinds of vocab and context questions there are. And we'll have a little discussion with some different kinds of examples. First of all, what is a vocab and context question? They're the questions that ask you this. In line X, the word blank most nearly means what? Right? It's simple. They're almost always the same. They follow the same pattern. But they can be some of the most difficult questions, especially, as I said, for ESL students, because connotation and meaning in the text can be difficult to master. So even students that score over 700, 800, they can have a hard time with these because it can be a very delicate difference, and they're hard to prove or disprove. But there is a proven method for answering these to the best of your ability, and it's pretty simple. First, when you get one of these questions, go back to the passage and read the sentence that's mentioned in the question again, along with the sentence before it and the sentence after it, so you get the full context. And do not, as I've said many, many times before, do not read the answer choices first, especially with these questions. It's more important than anything with these questions to not read the answer choices first, because if you read the answer choices for this first, with the most nearly means in the blank, then it's really going to skew your perception of what should go in the blank. So if you see in line blank the word most nearly means, you need to I would recommend covering up the answer choices with your hand before you go back to the passage. So do not read the answer choices first. Then when you read the word in the question, cover it with your finger and supply your own choice for the blank. So read the question in line 4. The word blank most nearly means, say it's cherry. The word cherry most literally means you go back to the passage and literally cover the word up with your finger. Don't read the word as you read the sentence. Read the sentence before it, the sentence itself, and the sentence after, and supply your own word for the blank, the one that most naturally fits as you read it. Then go back to the answer choices in the question and pick the one that fits closest with what you expected. It doesn't have to be an exact match, but the one that fits closest. Don't think too hard. Your first choice should be the one that you go with. The more you think about it, the trickier these get, because you start thinking, oh, but sometimes this means this, and sometimes this means this, and you will actually confuse yourself more if you spend too much time thinking about these. Almost always, your first instinct is the right one. The other answer choices they choose are purposely meant to confuse you. So go with your gut. That's the only time I'm going to tell you that is on these questions. When you follow this method, go with your gut and you're going to be right more often than you're wrong. If you can't think of an immediate choice, just keep reading it until your brain supplies something that goes there. Keep doing it. Keep plugging away. Read it 2 or 3 or 4 times until your brain's like, oh, I see what needs to go in that blank. I see what's missing. And then go back and read the choices. The most important thing is coming up with your own synonym and not just plugging in the answer choices, because you will get confused. So let's practice a little bit. Let's say the question asks the word blank. We're going to do it in a different way. I'm not just going to give you an answer. I'm not just going to give you a question first. We're going to see how this works exactly. We are not going to know what word we're looking for. Okay? You're going to supply the meaning in context. The word blank in line 10 most nearly means what? So you got to go to line 10 in the passage. You haven't read any of the answer choices. You got to go to line 10 in the passage and read it and the sentences around it without this word as such. When we'll read it. I couldn't believe what I had heard. I explored the idea in my mind and came to blank with a disheartening crash on a horrible thought. I had been wrong the whole time. Okay? Read this. Think for yourself. What word, any word, what's the first word that pops into your mind? Okay? So, let's read it together. I'll supply the first word that pops into my mind. I couldn't believe what I had heard. I explored the idea in my mind and came to understand with a disheartening crash on a horrible thought. Oh, well, understand doesn't work really well right there. Let's try another one. And came to rest with a disheartening crash, because I'm moving. Okay, I came to rest with a disheartening crash on a horrible thought. I had been wrong the whole time. I landed on, I rested, I came to ground. That's what's in my mind. Come to a position. So let's see. What word goes best in the blank? You might think, like I said, that rest or land goes best. So we're thinking rest, we're thinking land, we're thinking come to a point and stay. So which of the following choices goes best in the blank? Arrive, strike, capture, receive, dismount. So now you need to act fast. You need to see the one that's closest. And don't think too much. We're thinking about come to a point. That's arrive. That's the choice we make. Don't think too much about it. If you start thinking about this and you start plugging these in, and I explored the idea in my mind and came to arrive with a disheartening crash on a horrible thought. I arrived with a disheartening crash on a horrible thought. Makes sense. That's it. You're done. Don't think too hard about these. They can be very tricky. So the correct answer was A. The original word that I had put in this blank was land. The original word in the question was land. And arrive is the correct answer. This is a more simple version of these questions. They can get a little more complicated. The answer choices are a little more tricky, because if we look in this question, I came to strike with a disheartening crash. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Capture certainly doesn't make sense. Receive and dismount, none of those really make a lot of sense if you plug them in. But they get more complicated than that. In this case, it's about the connotation of the sentence rather than the definition of a word. But there are questions when more than one of the answer choices will fit grammatically, will fit conceptually into that blank, and that's when the finger over the word really works better. And so let's put that into effect. I'll show you an example. Again, read the whole thing and supply your own word in the blank. By marketing directly to teens, the company seeks to influence their very idea of cool. They claim to do this with the least manipulative blank possible by limiting their ads to only magazines the children would buy themselves. However, the reality is different. What word pops into your head there? They claim to do this with the least manipulative way. With the least manipulative way possible. That's what it sounds like to me. In the least manipulative way possible. The word for the blank is clearly way. And what are our choices? Fad, custom, design, adaptation, and method. So which one are we going to choose? Custom is a way, and design can be a way, adaptation can be a way, adaptation can be a way, method is way. Well, fad's not, and adaptation's not. So you can see how these can get complicated. You can see how these can get confusing. So we need to think about way in context. What does way mean when it means this? So without knowing the original word, either custom, the least manipulative custom possible, or the least manipulative method possible, they both might work as a meaning in the blank. So we have to know that the original word was fashion. In many questions, you don't even have to know what the original word was. You just replace it with your finger. You don't even have to look at it to know what should go in the blank. But in some, you have to know that the original word was fashion and know that when fashion means custom, that's different than when it means method. So fashion as custom does not mean way, because it's more like fad, like fashionable clothes, and that's not what we want. So method is the answer that we need, the least manipulative method possible. That's what we're looking for. So one final question to bring all this strategy. We'll try it one more time. Always go back to the passage, put your finger over the word. Pretty simple. Language is not a good or bad thing, but a natural outgrowth of the impacts that environment and necessity have on a body of people and the circumstances with which they struggle. So, put your finger over the blank. What concept does body most nearly mean? Put your finger over the blank, just like I am literally doing right here. Take a moment and think of what should go in the blank. Language is not a good or a bad thing, but a natural outgrowth of the impacts that the environment and necessity have on a group of people and the circumstances with which they struggle. That's what comes to my mind. Group. Now, with the word exposed, which ones work here? Enlarged mass, central part, physical structure, entire group, full flavor. With body open, now that we can see it, if we do it without our finger over it, body does mean enlarged mass. Body does mean physical structure. It means group, but actually because we have connotations with the word body, enlarged mass and physical structure and even central part, we know the full flavor is not right, but the other four kind of make sense. And knowing that it's body, we can get confused, but if you put your fingers over the blank, it's much, much easier, and you know that group goes in there almost immediately, and you're not confused by the many meanings of the word body. So you might panic. You might say, oh, but A, but B, but D, but C even? I don't know. I'm afraid. That's why you cover it up with your finger. And you see that it's easier here. With the word blank, we clearly, group just leaps right into that blank. Immediately, that necessarily have on a blank of people. Group of people is almost an idiom. A group of people. If you have body there, it confuses you. We know it's an entire group. The original word can confuse us. So to recap this video, what strategy should I use for these questions? It's not a complicated strategy. Put your finger over the word and come up with your own answer. It seems simplistic, it seems almost primitive, but it works. It works consistently. Put your finger over the blank. And only if you have trouble finding the answer, if there's two choices that are close to the meaning that you find, only then really worry about what the original word was. And how many kinds of vocabulary in context questions are there? 2, but it's really just an extension of 1. One is a simpler replacement and the other is based on word usage alone. So, in the next video, we're going to talk about inference, how to logically process certain things, what can we take out of passages, and we're also going to talk about double passages, which are heavily related to inference. So, thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.